Hello again. I'm just going to do something quite short on this shop windowing that I've referred to a few times in videos. This process where an authority, a politician, or whoever it may be, presents something in a very sort of obvious but simplistic, emotive way to get sort of buy-in and trust from the public, but behind it there are much more sinister moves at play. And in the current times, those more sinister moves tend to be an erosion of free speech and liberty. And the three examples I use also try to tie together because they're all part of the same theme as I see it. But the first one, and I know Starmer's tough to listen to, but this is the press conference he did with Trump Checkers. And he's asked a question about free speech and really essentially the online safety legislation. Now listen to what he does here.
It's really interesting to see how you run the country as a proud Christian leader. And it really begs the question to the Prime Minister, if you don't mind, are we still a Christian country? But also...
when you say we, are you talking here or...
Here. The
here?
UK. I'm still British. I might live in America. I'm still British. But also...
I can't give you that answer.
That's for the Prime Minister. But also... despite what we talked about in Scotland a few weeks ago, we still have 12,000 people a year here being arrested for social media posts, for free speech violations. Does that not remain an important area that there is still a lot of disagreement on?
I'd like to have you answer that.
Yeah, look, I mean, in terms of a Christian country, I was Christian, so that is, my church has been all my life. And we are, that is wired into our informal constitution. Of course, we celebrate many other faiths as well, and I'm really proud that we're able to do so as a country. And on free speech, that has long lived in this country. Free speech is one of the founding values of the United Kingdom, and we protect it jealously and fiercely, and always will. We will bear down on any limits on free speech. I draw a limit between free speech and the speech of those that want to peddle paedophilia and suicide social media to children. And therefore, I'm all for free speech. I'm also for protecting children from things that will harm them, paedophiles, those that peddle suicide, which had a terrible consequence for individual, particularly teenagers. And so that's the balance we strike. But we have had freedom of speech in this country for a very long time, and we will always protect it.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Brian.
Well, that's enough of Starmer. And the religious stuff, I'm not interested in. I don't follow religion, but I respect those who wish to do so and would never do anything to disparage such. But the free speech side is what interests me. Notice what he did is he brought it back to emotive issues, relevant and very powerful issues, peddling suicide and also also paedophilia. Almost everyone would agree that can't be tolerated. Yeah, there's no debate to be had there, but it didn't require a vast piece of legislative nonsense like the Online Safety Act to address those things. Not at all. So he's putting forward the shop window, what you want to see, what you want to hear, and say, oh yeah, I'm on board with that. But behind it, there's the more sinister apparatus, which the lady alluded to in her question. And you noticed Super Peter Kyle tried to do the same with Nigel Farage when he brought up the similar issues. He sort of effectively in a clumsy way. So you can tell they've had the same training because they both executed what they've been trained to do very poorly. Where Carl effectively tried to say that Farage would have been some Jimmy Savile apologist, which is a disgraceful thing to say. No, I don't support Farage. I personally think he's a bit of a grifter. I understand why people are looking for alternatives. but neither do I think he's any type of person who would condone Jimmy Savile. So they've used that same technique to show something that makes you buy in and think, yeah, this is, we're right, we can be on board with this. And then behind it, you've got this vast apparatus where essentially you can write something that could be misinterpreted or interpreted in any number of ways. And then you get your door kicked in by police whilst the local shops are being relieved of their stock. So that's a very good example of shop windowing. There's another two, and the other one is the terrorism legislation, because again they did the same with that, saying we've got to sort of cut down and stamp down on terrorism and so on and so forth, so we need this legislation. Yes, of course, people who want to harm other people for some ideological or other twisted ambition, virtually everyone would say yes, of course we must do that. We totally support that, and so do I. But then behind it, you make the definition of terrorism so subjective, it can be applied to anybody who raises inconvenient issues. Anyone can then become a terrorist. And you saw that with Palestine Action, where, as I said, I don't condone vandalism and damaging property, but that's what they did. You could argue they're vandals, but you can't. I think any credible argument say that they're terrorists, and then before you know it, you can manhandle disabled, elderly people, other vulnerable people who are standing up for what they believe is genocide in Gaza, and say that they're supporting terrorism. So it's the same technique. So watch out for this, because it's very, very dangerous, and we're seeing more of it. And on Palestine, you can see, isn't it bizarre that when effectively Gaza has been destroyed and razed to the ground with huge numbers of deaths and so on and so forth, suddenly they want to support a two-state solution, and people are stepping forward and saying so on. We're with Starmer and so on. It's political cowardice. Why wouldn't you have done this many months ago and tried to save a huge number of lives? They just wanted to wait until the place had been destroyed, then step forward and try to play heroes. And actually, in that same interview, if you listen to it, when they were asked about this, they both were following the same script. They pegged it back to October the 7th. And of course, they were heinous acts. There's no doubt about that. But what people have questioned is the proportionality of the response and huge number of casualties that's followed, and deaths and starvation and so on. Questioning Gaza does not make you anti-Semitic, not in one respect at all. Personally, I don't see neither should happen. Both should live side by side in respect and peace. But so they did the shop windowing again when they answered an awkward question there, and now of course it's like the corruption isn't really being hidden anymore, because we're told that Tony Blair will step forward in some sort of viceroy reconstruction role when he was during his time in office was involved in two wars, Afghanistan and Iraq. Well, more actually, but those two headline ones. Neither country had ever attacked the UK or said they were going to, and there was a huge number of lives lost, massive amount of lives lost. So if you were a Muslim, and again, I don't follow religion, you would look at that and you'd find that very, very hard to reconcile, and it would make you very, very upset and angry. And it's appalling. So the final example is, of course, digital ID, and well, he's doing the shop window again here, because he knows that borders and immigration is a emotive issue, and whether you're pro-immigration or against immigration or somewhere in between, the real fundamental issue is the lack of management of it, and which is causing most concern, and how people are processed when they're here. And he knows he's under pressure. his people have seen through his ridiculous one-in, one-out thing with France, and he's trying to come up with something that makes him look proactive, trying to sell it on the basis of our borders will be more secure, borders will be more secure. That is complete and utter nonsense. You do not need a digital ID to do that. He's shop windowing it to try and get himself out of trouble, using an emotional issue and trying to bring in unprecedented amount of surveillance and a huge reduction in liberty in the process. And if you put the three together, your terrorism legislation, your online safety legislation, and now digital IDs, essentially your liberty is gone. It's being killed, and then it becomes a choice for people, because do you say, well, providing I've got a job, I can pay my bills and I can scroll my smartphone, I don't really care that much. But these are dangerous times for to be so casual about that, and people have got to take a good look at this, and they've got to say, well, in our favour we have numbers and we have the power to say no. No, violence has no place in this, but people can do those things, and it's almost going back to Gandhi, where he looks and he sees that his oppressors, the British in that particular instance, they will use violence and intimidation against him, but if he remains peaceful, he remains defiant but peaceful, and he maintains the moral high ground. And he needs to be brave, because he knew that he would be treated roughly and his oppressors would try to do him immense harm, but he stuck at it. And people have got to look at people like Gandhi and say, this is what we need to do. We won't get involved in violence because we lose the morality of our argument then. That is what our oppressors would want us to do. We must stay away from that at all times. We must say no, explain why we say no. We must use, as I've used on these videos, this Socratic approach to dismantle these arguments and say we won't accept it. And that's what people will either do that or they will lose their freedom. And it's a big choice to make. And it is when, I don't speak for the man, and far too insignificant to even be noticed by him. But when Elon Musk was talking, the mainstream media twisted it as they always do. But when he was saying violence is coming to you, the way I interpreted that was not a call for violence, not at all. But what he said is, the way I interpreted it is, if you stand up for your liberties and you push back and say no, enough, they will be violent against you in one form or another. They will try to weaponize legal system, that the media will be against you, and so on and so forth, and they will use violence against you. They will interpret this shop window legislation I've just discussed to use it against you, to commit violence against you and intimidation. But it's either that or your freedom. It's a very big choice. And to go on to this, what I've discussed many times about the political spectrum, if you put them together, oppressive online legislation, very, very subjective and oppressive terror legislation, where effectively the state can oppress those who oppose it, when all people are doing is trying to make a point, they're not terrorists. And then digital ID, that's all big state. So let's go back to the original political spectrum, where on the left we had the liberals, on the right we had the big state. So in that respect, the irony is, whilst he calls out people for being far right, not that Starmer knows what it means, nobody's media are gated from asking him what it actually means. On the original scale, he is far right, because he's anti-libertarian, big state, surveillance, and so on. The left is libertarian, your rights of men, women, and individuals. Your freedom of thought, your freedom of expression, your free movement of capital, and so on. It's the right that is your big state, your oppressive state, overbearing state. And that's what Starmer is. So he's right calling people far right. And that's really the way you've got to look. Get rid of this political spectrum. They're using it to mentally box you. Go back to the original version and you'll see things a lot clearer. And Starmer is a big state right positioned legal industry frontman who wants to oppress the population because they can see through his nonsense. He is Robespierre. Robespierre was the same. Hijacking the essence of the French Revolution and just ramming through a new form of tyranny. People saw through it. People stood up and he became ever more aggressive and more tyrannical. And it was the end of it. Now, as I've said, I'm using this as a metaphor. I don't want to see Starmer harmed. I'd like to see him realize that he's such a divisive figure. He steps down for the good of the nation, but I don't want to see him harmed. But he is a Robespierre. And to give you a bit of a primer, as it were, since I do look to literature for that. And this is a trendy phrase, isn't it? When you hear that, Franz Kafka, because people like using this Kafka-tesque. But like so many authors from the past, there were parts of him that had a bit of genius about him, and he was a visionary in some ways, like Eric Blair, George Orwell, Dostoevsky, and many others. And I gave you an example of Joseph Conrad as well, the Polish-British author. Now, if you read, he wrote many short novels or novellas, as the people say, but if you read The Trial, of course, he's a writer. He wants to, make his work engaging and so on and so forth. So there's going to be some exaggeration in it, but you follow it. Stop every now and again and consider what he's writing. Look through a bit of the writer's exaggeration. There's a powerful, very, very powerful message there. And I would say that most people who use this trendy term Kafka-tesque have never really read the novels. But if you can read the short novel, The Trial, it will make you think, and it will give you some indication of what Franz Kafka saw coming for us. Right, that's it for now. Take care. I have to probably spend more time. I have to really spend more time processing private assets. By the way, we've had lots of threats as well. We've had threats in the FCA, we've had threats in the private assets side, and we've had threats put to us saying if we pursue both of them, bad things will happen to us. So we're used to it, but you have to keep going. Take care for now. Bye.